Students, today history, unit 8, nationalism, Gandhian phase. Listen here carefully, students. First roundtable conference. Ramsay MacDonald. He was the Prime Minister of British. He started the federal government in India. But this federal government, there is no result. So the first roundtable conference was held at London in 1931. In 1930. 1930, first roundtable conference were held at London in 1930. Ramsay MacDonald was the British Prime Minister. He wanted to India, federal government for India. But there is no result. So India was not attended the first roundtable conference in London. Gandhi-Irvin Pact. In 5th March 1931, Gandhi-Irvin Pact were started. An agreement were made in between the Gandhi and Irvin. Irvin belonged to British. Gandhi belonged to India. So both of them agreement were made in 5th March 1931. According to the agreement, Mahatma Gandhi demanded want to release the political prisoners. Students, in the salt satyagraha, many people were arrested by the British. During the salt satyagraha, Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi, and in Tamil Nadu, Rajaji, Vedaranyam, Trichy to Vedaranyam. The salt march were made. So according to that, after the salt satyagraha, many people were arrested. Indian people were arrested by the British. So according to the Gandhi-Irvin Pact, Gandhi demanded to release all the political prisoners. Many people were arrested, no? These people want to release. Gandhi demanded to the British. According to the Gandhi-Irvin Pact, Irvin accepted to release all the political prisoners. So Gandhi agreed to withdrawal of civil disobedience movement, suspend of the civil disobedience movement, or withdrawal of the civil disobedience movement. Irvin agreed to release all the political prisoners, and Gandhi agreed to suspend the civil disobedience movement. According to that Gandhi-Irvin Pact, Gandhi decided to attend the second roundtable conference. Second roundtable conference was held at London in 1931. In 1931, held at London in 1931, second roundtable conference was started. 7th September 1931. In the second roundtable conference, Congress decided to attend the second roundtable conference. Gandhi went to London and attended the conference. In that conference, Gandhi was disappointed because of there was no concrete outcome for the independence of India. So Gandhiji was upset and returned to India. renewal of civil disobedience movement. The second roundtable conference held at London in 1931, Gandhiji was attended, but there was no concrete outcome. So Gandhiji was upset and he returned to India. When he reached India, Gandhiji decided to revive the civil disobedience movement. Again, civil disobedience movement was started, or salt satyagraha were started. The many leaders were participated in the civil disobedience movement, and martial law were proposed by the British. So many leaders were arrested, including Gandhi also arrested. In 4th January 1931, the Gandhiji also arrested. Third Roundtable Conference. In the third Roundtable Conference held at London in 1932, third Roundtable Conference held at London. But India was not attended the third Roundtable Conference because of there is no favor for Indians during that time. The Britishers were dominated the Indian people. So Gandhiji was neglected to attend the third Roundtable Conference in London. Communal Award. On 16th August 1932, Ramsay MacDonald, the British Prime Minister, announced the Communal Award. According to the Communal Award, separate electorate for the different sect of the people, particularly, namely, Muslims, Sikhs, Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians, women and depressed classes. These sects necessary for separate electorates during that time. Pune Pact. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar announced the separate electorate for the depressed classes. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the leader of the depressed classes. He announced the separate electorate for the depressed classes. Gandhiji was not willing to start the separate electorate for the depressed classes. So, Gandhiji went on fast unto death. After that, many leaders talks with the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and finally the Gandhi and Ambedkar agreement were made. In that agreement were known as Pune Pact. In between Gandhi and Ambedkar, an treaty, an agreement were made. In that agreement were known as Pune Pact. According to the Pune Pact, the main terms were Dr. B.R. Ambedkar abandoned the separate electorate for the depressed classes. Instead of, he accepted joint electorate for the elections, both central and also state. But in condition with that, reservation were allotted for the depressed classes during that time, in between Gandhi and Ambedkar. Then agreement were made. In that agreement, the reservation for the depressed classes were allotted. The reserved seats increased 71 to 148 in the state legislature, and in central legislature 18% seats reserved for the depressed classes. Students, listen here. Once again, I am going to recall our first roundtable conference. First roundtable conference held at London in 1930. The Ramsay MacDonald was the Prime Minister of the Britain. He announced the federal government for India. But the first roundtable conference held at London, the India was not attended the first roundtable conference in London. So after that, Gandhi-Irwin Pact were met. According to the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, in 5th March 1931, the Gandhi-Irwin Pact were started. The Gandhi demanded to Irwin to release all the political prisoners. During the Salt Satyagraha, many people leaders were arrested by the British. So Gandhi requested to the Irwin to release all the political prisoners. If release all the political prisoners, India going to attend the second roundtable conference. That's why the Irwin also released all the political prisoners, and Gandhiji agreed to suspend the civil disobedience movement, and British agreed to release all the political prisoners. Second roundtable conference. Second roundtable conference held at London in the 7th September 1931. In the second roundtable conference, Gandhiji decided to attend the second roundtable conference. Gandhiji went to London and attended the second roundtable conference according to the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. But in the second roundtable conference in 1931, there was no concrete outcome for India regarding the independence. So Gandhiji was upset, and Gandhiji returned to India without any salvation. Renewal of the civil disobedience movement. When Gandhiji reached India from London, again Gandhiji revived the civil disobedience movement. Many places the civil disobedience movement was started, and many leaders were arrested. The martial law were passed by the British. Gandhiji was arrested in 4th January 1931. At the same time, the roundtable conference were going on in the London. Third roundtable conference. In the third roundtable conference, no one Indians were attended. The third roundtable conference held at London in 1932. But Indians were not attended the third roundtable conference. Noted. Communal Award. On 16th August 1932, the Communal Award were announced by the Ramsay MacDonald, the British Prime Minister. According to the Communal Award, separate electorate were announced. The separate electorate for Muslims, Sikhs, Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians, women and depressed classes. Pune Pact. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the leader of the depressed classes. He strongly announced the separate electorate for the depressed classes. According to the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the separate electorate for the depressed classes were not accepted by the Gandhi. So Gandhiji went on fast unto death. Many leaders were talks with them. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Finally, an agreement were met in between Gandhi and Ambedkar. According to the agreement, the terms and conditions were paused. According to the Gandhi and Ambedkar agreement known as Pune Pact, in that Pune Pact, Dr. Ambedkar abandoned the separate electorate for the depressed classes. Abandon means leave. Leave the separate electorate for the depressed classes. Instead of the joint electorate for the both state and central were decided. In condition with the reservation for the depressed classes were announced. Reservation for the seats were allotted for the depressed classes. The seats were reserved for the depressed classes increased 71 to 148. In central, 18% seats were reserved for depressed classes. Okay then, see you tomorrow, students. Learn thoroughly, and in the next topic tomorrow we'll see.
ಈ ಬಾರ ಆರು ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ